Okay, well, David takes his seat. I'd like to ask our panel members, Ian Newport and John Lamb, to come up onto the stage. Excellent presentation, David. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, the collaboration between LCRIG and the AIA producing real insight there into the sector. So hopefully the mics are working. So we have John Lamb, the chair of the ABC board, that's Adaptation, Biodiversity and Climate, and Ian Newport, Highways Asset Manager from Dorset Council. John, I'll start with you if I may. Are you surprised by those findings?
Let's go. Set me up. You were sat at this chair.
Button didn't work for me, but so in short, low levels of warm mix. And even though people have declared a climate emergency, it's not really following through to their asset management plans. Does that surprise you?
I think my first instance is, who is it that's been filling the survey in? I think as reflected, this survey is well respected and it's embedded across a lot of highway authorities. I would just like to sense check as to whether or not the person who always fills it in is the one who may not be connected with the cutting edge work that is taking place. I think we need to reflect on the fact that there is an expectation upon us, but it's quite clear that we can't ignore the figures as a call to act. I guess how we respond is something that we could come back to as the discussion develops.
Ian, what's your initial reaction to the findings there, and taking up that point, how do you think we should respond to them?
It's quite surprising, really. I come from a sort of rural authority, and down in Dorset, we sort of very early on adopted all mix asphalt, so back in 2020, and we set ourselves a target that 50% of our base and binder would be done with all mix asphalts, and it's been something that we've always wanted to improve on and push further. So the target initially was aspirational, and the first year we hit 39%. And it's crept up and crept up. And to be fair, we've looked at ourselves and thought we could do more. We're not achieving the target that we want to do. At the moment, thanks to some of my colleagues over there, we're at 47% on this year to date. And we realised that we could go a lot further because I think there's sort of developments and progression that we can do with moving into using warm mix in surface courses as well. So it's something that we've tried to connect that message between sort of stakeholders and those decision makers with ourselves, but it's something that was sort of quite embedded in Dorset, and it's something that we've been sort of quite passionate about, because those dates when we all started looking at sort of net zero dates, they seemed a long way away, and they're getting progressively closer, and the ratchet is somewhat creeping up. So if you haven't considered, I would say, consider starting to think about these things and move a lot quicker, because obviously, as was covered earlier, if the industry aren't getting people to order it, then it's difficult for you to meet those targets, and it's something that we've looked at it being, you have to come up with a design reason why you're not using that material.
That's an interesting point. So that's kind of reversing the emphasis. Could you kind of just sketch out for us some of the challenges you experienced as you were moving towards more warm mix, and what advice you'd give to other authorities that are trying to go on the same journey as you?
I think it's not at designer level. The issue is at stakeholder level, and it's the commitment from the organisation as a goal. We all put our aspirations as to what we want to do in our documents, but it's living up to those. So it's, for us, we all, through all of the departments in Dorset within the highway service, we all have targets. So we have a 50% wall mix asphalt target. We have, recycled material at 30% to be put into our work. Everything is there and targeted and monitored, and we track that as a service. So it's just being really clear about the end goal, about what you want to achieve, and then move towards it. But don't don't not try something. So we set ourselves a 50% goal and are underperforming that goal, but at least we have a point on the horizon to aim for. So if you just think, well, we can't do it, so we won't do it, it is going to catch up with you at some point.
Right. So similar to the National Highways approach, you set that marker in the future and then you lay out exactly how many different ways you can get there. David, from the industry's perspective, what's your message to the sector? Is industry ready to supply on demand, or is there a process that needs a bit of collaboration between the client and industry as we move through and try to put more warm mix out there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not wearing my my commercial hat today, so I'll say it across all suppliers to the industry. But warm mix asphalt is a standard that is available from all asphalt companies, I imagine, and certainly all bitumen producers now have it available. I'd just like to come back on some of the points that were made, if I may rudely do so. I think it's really important to remember that the AIA is shining a light. We're not generating the data. The data is provided by the 72% of the 100 and whatever local authorities there are now, and the data, therefore, can bear outliers. But the level we're talking about, just for the example of 5% versus what there could be in terms of the amount of warm mix asphalt that's used, it's a very small proportion. So we can argue about the data endlessly, but that gap is so big, and it did surprise us that it really does not seem that we've moved far enough forward for something which is specified, it is available, and let's be honest, it's not a significant change in terms of the cost of the material either, given the environmental benefits that there are from using that material.
So why do you think there is this gap?
Well, again, we shine the light. We don't give the solutions. I think from the survey, what has been said from local authorities is help us to understand better the benefits. I think they're saying help us to understand the alternatives, and more than that, quantify it. Give us the mechanics, give us the calculators that provide the evidence and the proof points so that we can be convinced that we're spending money in the right way. And that is all now available. We have sharing best practice. Sorry to advertise again, but we will be doing that at Sharing Best Practice, where you will hear more about the different materials that are available.
Okay. John, from the UK Roads Leadership Group, is this a matter of that there needs to be some sector leadership? Someone needs to kind of take on this issue and drive it down and out through the authorities?
Well, yes, and we are the people we've been waiting for in many respects. But I think there's a lot of leadership out there already. I think when you look at it, no one could have escaped the fact that there are targets and obligations upon society across the UK. 100% net zero by 2050, with an interim target of by 2027 of about 52%. So conversation there about 47% achievement. It's on the right track. I guess there's the who, the how, and the when, and for many authorities that's already started. And you look at that, and we need to exemplify them. And LCRIG's brilliant in terms of providing those case studies to actually showcase that actually people like you, the engineers and the asset managers, actually are doing this. It's not as hard as some might think, but there are over 200 local highway authorities, and in that respect, there's 200 asset managers, 200 heads of service. By golly, we're a bit of a quirky bunch, aren't we? Because all said and done, we don't believe it. I can remember when LEDs were first being rolled out, and there was a whole load of people saying, look, these are never going to catch on. And you look at it and say, well, they have to. Some of this stuff has to happen. If we need to innovate and drive change, then that's what we have to do. But I hope that the picture is a little less bleak, and I am always a glass half full you look at the way in which the UK Department for Transport is investing £30 million for decarbonisation of UK highways. That is without precedent around the world. I serve on the World Road Association, and there's a lot to be proud of within the UK.
And there's risk. Live labs too.
With the live labs too, yeah. There's a risk that we read those figures and we go away feeling a bit all doomy and gloomy and think our kids are all going to, reap the problems of our lack of action. I think there has historically been a lack of action. The Rio Earth Summit was in 1992. That, for me, showed that we were throwing more fuel on the fire in a heating world. There was a lot of people there over 30 years ago. I know, I am that old. And you look at it and say, well, actually, what is life going to be like in 30 years' time? What is your role? What is your responsibility? It is something that you, as clients, need to ask your supply chain, which account for most of the carbon that we use within highways. What are you doing? Use that as a differentiator. Put it in your procurement documents. Have the conversations with your suppliers to try and understand what is the choice between different products, be that on street lighting, where I'm working on the East Riding Live Lab to decarbonise street lighting, which is about going back fundamentally, checking and challenging, why do we light? For whom? Because even if we had green energy, as highway authorities, we're still paying for the electricity. And therefore, we do need to think radically going right back to school. And a lot of people do need to go back to school. And the easiest way to do that is reconnect with people who are half our age, who are new to the sector, who are going to be the innovators and the people who drive this forward in a way that we've not been able to do. But we're the heads of service and group managers, and we're the ones who can actually empower and energise our frontline teams to lead on this and drive it through. I'm really confident that there's an opportunity through events like this for that.
Okay, positive words and positive actions from you, Ian. Can you tell us, what's the conversation like within the highway authority when you're trying to make a change like this, when you're setting a new strategy to take on board the climate emergency, when you're procuring in a different way? Who do you need to speak to? Procurement, finance directors, chief exec, or can it be done just within the highways department? What's the process of change like?
I mean, for us, it's usually starting with our cabinet member for highways. Previously we changed administrations in May, and our current administration has now moved our climate targets forward by 5 years, because they realise that the environmental challenges are something they're very passionate about in Dorset. So they've accelerated that for us. So this, although we thought we were doing okay, this has become very much even more real because we have a shorter runway than we thought we had. I suppose the initial thing is, as like I was saying earlier, it is that senior leadership buy-in. I think, the industry is there to provide the materials if we want them, and it's, I would say, through like myself as an asset manager and stuff like that, is putting it into our key strategic documents that we say, this is the standard, this is where you start. I've already bored my team with it very quickly whilst I've been in post. Is the old sort of cost and quality and time triangle. And I said, now it's cost and quality and carbon. And that's something that we have to consider in everything that we do. So whatever, all of the suites of treatments that will go around and we'll see all the suppliers providing today, we have to look at those and go, how can we do this in the most, I suppose, in the greenest way, reducing carbon and being able to demonstrate that whilst looking at the whole life cost as well. So, sometimes it's about, as was said earlier, providing a more durable material that's going to last longer and actually being able to communicate those messages to stakeholders, and get those messages across so that they understand the reasons why we do stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the durable material, because is there a slight conflict here, David, that actually what people are saying potentially is it's all very well kind of green materials and so on, but the best, greenest, most sustainable solution is the most durable. So if I'm procuring for the most durable, I'm doing the right thing by the planet. What's your response to that? Does the 70% of people going for the most durable, are they in conflict with warm mix in some ways?
Absolutely, what you're saying is correct. There is a real dilemma here that, for example, using polymer modified binders, those materials are more expensive than a standard pen bitumen. You can have low temperature in the both options. You can have biogenics in both options. But to enhance durability, most of the measures, not all of them, are normally around materials which are more expensive. There are developments in terms of high binder content materials, going deeper in single layers and so on. There are additives these days which are completely from recycled materials that are coming through the research process, and some of them are actually on the pavement now undergoing their trials. Some have gone through trials and are at commercialization phase, and I encourage you to look at those materials when we have our sharing best practice. But there is a dilemma that what we're asked to do is short-term maintenance, put money into the roads to fix problems that have come about because the pavements have not been as durable as they could have been. My dear old mother often used to say, buy cheap, buy twice. Now, that was fine because she came from the East End of London and didn't have any money, so she only dreamt of buying the better things. But the reality is that analogy is true. We have been using cost as the key driver, keep the costs down, and what we've seen, the budgets have been cut and cut and cut. How on earth do we close that gap now to a more durable material and do it at a lower cost? I think that is something which would be extremely difficult to achieve.
And is there question of risk here? Because the local authority is taking all of the risk. Is there a way that it can work with industry to perhaps share some of the risk when we do try to invest in durability? Because obviously if you invest in durability and for whatever reason it doesn't come off, you're left with two problems.
But I think that collaboration's already happening. I think there are already companies working with local authorities or service providers who are doing the research, developing these materials without at the moment having a home for them. So there's a big contribution made by industry in preparing for the next generation. And there are also things like live labs, which industry is contributing to. There are other collaborations occurring across the industry, which I won't know about, but I hear about when I come to events like this. And I agree with John, we really have to celebrate the innovation in this area of industry, thanks to the need. And sometimes it's the needs that generates the innovative materials. I'm not doom and gloom, but I'm presenting the data which the good ladies and gentlemen out there have provided to us. And it is a gloomy picture. We have to find a way of moving that paradigm.
Okay. Please.
Just to come in on that, I think we can sometimes forget the basics. The way in which we as clients engage with the commercial sector is still something that is too much of a personal choice down to the individual local highway authority. Oh, we go to market every 2 years. That kind of contractual relationship is transactional. It's a case of, what can you give me for the next 2 years? Lowest price, and it drives the wrong behaviours. Time and again, we find that if you're looking at things that are a longer relationship, then you can create that proper relationship between the client, the contractor, and with the portfolio holder to build that relationship up. I personally think things like the 25-year PFIs were too long, but we need something that's at a sweet spot, something around those key areas. But I think we shouldn't forget that we have got asset management plans, and the asset management plan is where we wrestle with that issue as to, do we do lots of roads for 10 years or a few roads for 20 years, so on. And there are going to be certain roads where you do say, do you know what, we really want to go in there and we don't want to come back for 20 years. That's the kind of honest conversation. But that then drives certain solutions. Surface dressing is a fantastic product out there. In other areas is not going to be appropriate, depending on where you live, depending on the climatic forces that are occurring now. We've just gone through 200 years of the wettest in British history, and every single area of Britain is now reaching unprecedented levels of intervention. And this is not even the worst of it. What we've had in the last few weeks is not a named storm. That is yet to come on ground conditions that are sodden. That is the stuff that is causing our structures and our carriageway to rot from below. So you could actually put a lot of money on the smartest, greenest pothole filling technique. But fundamentally, if you've not got a structure right, this is binary. The bridge is here today and it is gone tomorrow. And that is the fundamental issue that we now need to put this front and centre. So yes, decarbonisation, net zero, we've got the obligation as part of the council. But at the same time, we have to wrestle with this issue about saying, do you know what? There are certain assets that are actually going to be not with us in the future, and we need to prepare for that as well now.
How much knowledge do we really have of what the ideal situation would be on this? I mean, are we still wrestling, as you say, with even knowing what the right answer is? Because if you could start from scratch and money's no object, would you even know what to procure and how to lay the roads to get the maximum sustainability and durability?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things you've got to, I mean, what was said, you've got to think about the key parts of the network. That, you know, so if you were starting from scratch, we would build it all in a different way. So let's be honest, you know, we're in Dorset. You know, they are evolved roads. There are parts of the county where they're very, very much evolved roads, and you know, whatever treatment you decide to use to extend life or do whatever, you need a substrate that's going to be there for a period of time so that you can apply those treatments. So it's really important that the foundations are right, and you know, obviously you can put measures in place to protect those, but you know, it wouldn't be that we would create everything, you know, from scratch in HRA and just go, let's do every cul-de-sac in the county and build everything that way because it's the most durable. It's understanding that, you know, Highways is a really, really broad church. We have a load of products that we can use, and it is about just applying the right thing to it. But the most important thing is probably, like what John has said, it is understanding there are bits of your network that are so service critical, right? That the disruption that, I mean, especially for our authority, that we have had on some major routes that are consistently failing every time we have moderate rain, that we're then needing to go in, majorly disrupt the traffic, majorly cause a disruption to our customers and our users. And we know that, you know, that really is an interim repair, but that's the best we can do at that time. So, like say, one of our roads that we've got some issues with currently, I've talked to the team about some drainage issues that are along there, and it's like, if we go in there from end to end, you know, we need to do everything throughout that stretch, and that's a really difficult conversation with the budget conversation. But you know, if you're thinking of all of the other levers within highway, so not the material, not the reactive maintenance that you'll need to carry out, and not that, but just, you know, the provision of transport and the end-to-end journey times for users and things like that. It's like, you need to keep that open. So making sure that that's built and constructed in a way that can stand up to what the elements are basically now throwing at it. We can't go, you know, you're taking a risk as an asset manager to go, hopefully it's going to dry up in a bit. Hopefully it won't be that bad in a couple. You know, we've progressively shown that this isn't going to happen. So you may have to look at that road and go, actually, the way that we've approached that for the last 25, 30 years of managing that road, that may not be the way going forward. And we may need to increase the specification, increase the drainage, and do things differently so that it's sustainable to maintain, you know, purely an arterial route. So
is the conversation, shouldn't we just close this down, take the pain, and relay it properly? Is that the conversation you're having? But no one really wants to have that conversation, so it gets kicked down the road.
That's number one. That's always a budget conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Number two, it's a condition conversation. So you've got to balance that out across the piece. You've got to understand that if you're not wanting to see a decline in your condition stats, or if you do, you've got to be able, like for me, to say to my head of service, or potentially to our cabinet member as well, the reason we've made those decisions and you're seeing a reducing condition in the unclassified roads is because I need to reprofile the budget to put into the strategic network, and we need to spend the money there to maintain those main routes. So yeah, they are difficult conversations.
Yeah.
But me and a load of other people in this room, they're probably the conversations they have most days.
Okay, so final thoughts, everyone. It's been a fascinating conversation. We've got a lot of problems here. In some ways, it might be surprising that anyone's able to do anything in this area, but we've got a legacy asset, we've got financial restraints, we've got a congested asset. David, thoughts? How are we going to get out of this? What's the key thing to making progress?
Well, we have the new materials, we have the innovation, we have DFT leading the charge with some of those materials. We have collaboration ongoing through things like live labs. And look around the room, the faces here do not just include grey-haired gentlemen like me. We now have younger people coming in the industry, and we are addressing the issues in terms of the talent pool which is needed to solve these problems which have occurred through a lack of funding. I'm optimistic, and although I'm sorry if you thought I was giving you a negative story, what I'm giving you is the reality of the situation as it's been provided to us by the local authorities. But I'm an optimist, not a pessimist.
Okay, so work with industry and the materials are there. John?
I'm going to make it personal and people talk about highway heroes. I'm talking about the superheroes of the sector. And they are called, Tim and Matt, and they are looking for our support. And we've got superheroes in this sector who are greying, if they still have hair, but they are our superheroes, and they are here and ready to support the dialogue. Yeah, it is Amanda Richards, it's Paul Binks, it's John Munslow, it's Sean Moon, it's Emily C, it's Paula. These are the key people, but you are all the key people who will be sat here in 10 years' time, because I won't be here in 10 years' time. Okay, I might be as a doddering old folk with a Zimmer frame or something like that. But for me, I think we've got lots of superheroes here. I think we've got a lot of people who get it. This is the real melting point. Innovation is here today, and that is a challenge to me, and it should be a challenge to all of you to say, go back, change your asset management plans, and actually convince Dom, who seems a bit half empty, to be honest.
No, flattery will get you everywhere, I think. Everyone's a superhero. Speaking of people who like to be flattered, politicians in political support seem quite important in your authority. Is that the key to solving this problem? Get the members on side and you can do anything.
Not just the members. Ultimately, it's through the whole organisation. It's the whole team. It's top down. So I suppose for me, the most important things is I could go back to Dorset now and say to my head of service, seeing the results from the alarm survey, we're ahead of the curve. We're all right. Take the foot off the gas. We're doing really well with all mixed asphalt. Aren't we great? In fact, in the conversation I've had with our sort of highways waste and recycling manager, is we know we can do more. We know we can do more with this. We know that we can need to push this on. So I'm assuming this is your book that's sat here, your notebook. And Dom's got a notebook that's sat here. We're not going to open it and read it, but on the front there is a sticker that says the first step is to take one. And I think for what we've talked about today, that is probably the message I say to everyone. Don't go away feeling disheartened and go, we're not really using warm mix, or we're not using that, and Dorset have moved along and they're ahead of the curve, and that's why Ian's sat up there talking about it. The reality is just, it has to change. It has to change. What we do as an industry has to change, and we just need to engage with people that are there, like you said. The amount of people in this room that if you want to talk to them about, oh, you're doing something differently, endorse it. Myself and Dave Blackburn, who is the waste and recycling manager, and Matt, who's the principal designer in our team over there, we're happy to share anything with anybody. If they want to know, come and find one of us, have a chat. That's the purpose of us being here.
Brilliant. Well, that's exactly why we're all here at LCRIG. This is the kind of thing you only get at Strictly Highways, exclusive news, excellent insights, bringing the industry together and supporting each other. Can I just say, buses back from the hotel are at 6:15 and 6:45 p.m. this evening. The drinks reception, sponsored by Geist, starts at 6:30 p.m. So don't miss that. Call for dinner will be at 7:45. The table plan will be ready in the reception area at the break. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we just finish the session with a round of applause for our fantastic panel? Ian Newport, John Lamb, David Giles.